He wears it better than you ever did. That's what I heard from the bedroom as I stepped through the front door after 18 years of service and 3 combat deployments. Wearing the uniform I almost died in. I hadn't even dropped my bag when I saw them. My wife, Valerie. My best friend, Brandon. And he was wearing my shirt. My USMC shirt. In my bed. But the real stab in the gut? She'd already drained our bank accounts. Forged my name. Sold the house I bought with WarPay, without me knowing. I didn't scream. I didn't throw hands. I walked out. Then I left her with nothing. No violence, just strategy. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Michael Durham, and I'm 37 years old. After 18 years in the Marine Corps, I still wake before dawn, polish my boots, and check the mail for Valerie's handwritten letters that stopped coming 6 months ago. My wife, Valerie, my high school sweetheart, manages our modest house near Camp Lejeune while I serve. She has power of attorney to handle everything while I'm deployed. The constant deployments took their toll on her. I hear it in her voice during our weekly calls, more distant each time. My best friend Brandon, who I saved from a burning Humvee in Fallujah, checks on her when he's stateside. What they don't know is that my retirement papers are already approved. My jaw tightens every time I think about the surprise I have planned. But let me start from the beginning. I'd been planning this homecoming for weeks. The afternoon sun hit Camp Lejeune's gates as I signed out. My duffel bag light on my shoulder. Retirement papers burning a hole in my pocket. 18 years of service was enough. Time to be the husband Valerie deserved. You know that feeling when everything seems perfect? Like God himself arranged the weather? That's how it felt driving down our street, past the Thompsons' always pristine lawn and Mrs. Peterson's wind chimes dancing in the breeze, the same chimes that played at our wedding reception 12 years ago. I noticed the unfamiliar silver Mustang in our driveway, but didn't think much of it. Valerie had plenty of friends from her book club, always hosting something or other. That's what made her special, keeping our home alive while I was gone. The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked up our path. The garden looked different. New flowers I didn't recognize, arranged in patterns Valerie must have seen in one of her magazines. My key slid into the lock, like always, but something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The house smelled wrong. Our home usually carried the scent of Valerie's vanilla candles or her signature apple pie. Instead, I caught whiffs of cooking oil and cologne. Not the kind I wore. This was heavier, muskier. The kind of scent that hangs in the air after someone's been around for hours. I set my bag down quietly by the door. Years of combat training kicking in without me even thinking about it. The hardwood didn't creak. I knew every loose board in this house. Voices drifted from down the hallway, past the photos of us through the years. Valerie's laugh, soft and intimate, in a way I hadn't heard in too long. He wears it better than you ever did. Those words froze me mid-step. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a stare in the dark. That tone, I'd heard it before, but only directed at me. Back when we were young, when she'd compliment how I looked in my dress blues. Then a man's voice responded, low and comfortable, too comfortable. A voice I knew as well as my own, from countless patrols and firefights. Brandon. My hand found the bedroom doorknob. Time slowed down like it does before an IED goes off. That stretched-out moment when you see the wire but can't stop the Humvee fast enough. I pushed the door open. There they were, tangled in sheets I'd helped Valerie pick out last Christmas. Brandon, my brother in arms, the man whose life I'd saved in Fallujah, wearing my favorite USMC shirt, the one Valerie had given me after my first deployment. And Valerie. Her eyes went wide when she saw me, like a deer caught in headlights. Mike? Her voice cracked. All the color drained from her face. Brandon scrambled to sit up, but couldn't seem to figure out what to do with his hands. "Brother, I can explain." "Don't." The word came out quiet. Deadly quiet. The kind of quiet that falls right before all hell breaks loose. I stood there, retirement papers still in my pocket, watching 18 years of trust burn to ash in our marriage bed. The same bed where I'd promised Valerie forever, where I'd held her through nightmares about me not coming home. Turns out, I should have been more worried about what happened while I was away. You'd think, after all the combat training, all the close calls in war zones, I'd explode, throw punches, break something. But real betrayal? It doesn't hit like a bullet. It hollows you out, leaves you standing there like a ghost in your own life. I backed away from the door, my combat boots suddenly too heavy on our polished floors. The same floors Valerie had insisted on when we bought the house. The same house I'd paid for in cash with my combat pay, trusting her to make it a home. "Mike, wait!" Valerie called after me, panic rising in her voice. But I was already moving down the hallway, past the wedding photos that now felt like evidence of a crime. I stood there, muscles locked like I was back in combat, waiting for the IED to go off. But this wasn't Iraq. This was my bedroom, my sanctuary, turned into ground zero of a different kind of explosion. The sight of Brandon wearing my PT shirt, the same one I'd sweated through countless morning runs, made my jaw clench so tight I thought my teeth might crack. You know that moment when your brain refuses to process what your eyes are seeing? Like it's trying to protect you from something that'll change everything? That's where I was, frozen in that doorway, watching two people I trusted most in the world scramble for excuses they didn't deserve to make. The bedroom still smelled like our morning coffee. Valerie's fancy hazelnut blend she'd started buying recently. Probably with Brandon in mind, not me. Funny how your mind catches these little details when your world's falling apart. The curtains were drawn, but a slice of afternoon sun cut across the bed like nature's own spotlight on their betrayal. Neither of them said another word. Maybe they saw something in my face that warned them off. Or maybe, and this thought hit harder, they'd played out this scenario before, wondering what they'd say when they finally got caught. Brandon's eyes dropped to the floor, his hand still gripping my shirt like he had any right to it. Valerie pulled the sheet higher, as if modesty mattered anymore. I didn't slam doors, didn't throw things, just turned and walked away, my boots marking time down our hallway like a funeral march. Each step felt like moving through sand, but my training kicked in. When you're wounded, you get to safety first. Assess the damage later. The drive to the Garden View Motel was a blur. I barely remember checking in, just the clerk's concerned look when I paid cash for a week. The room smelled like old cigarettes and broken dreams. Fitting, really. I lay on sheets that had seen better decades, staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like maps to places I'd rather be. What hurt worse? That's what kept circling in my head like a vulture picking at my thoughts. Valerie's betrayal cut deep. 18 years of marriage shredded like paper. But Brandon, that was different. In Fallujah, he'd been more than a brother in arms. When that IED hit our convoy, I'd dragged him from the burning Humvee. We'd made promises then, blood-soaked and desperate, about always having each other's backs. My phone kept lighting up with notifications, messages I couldn't bear to read. Out of habit, stupid, painful habit, I opened social media. Valerie's profile was right there, updated just hours ago. Her bio jumped out at me, "Building our dream life, one day at a time." The words hit me like a physical blow. Our dream life. Something cold and sharp settled in my gut. The kind of feeling you get when you realize you're not just dealing with a single betrayal, but maybe something bigger, more calculated. I sat up so fast my head spun. Valerie had power of attorney. She'd insisted on it before my last deployment. Just in case, she'd said. Just in case of what? My fingers shook as I pulled up our joint banking app. The password didn't work. Neither did the backup. That's when the real fear set in. Not the hot rage of catching them together, but the icy terror of realizing this might go deeper than just an affair. Valerie had access to everything, our savings, my combat pay, even my retirement fund, and suddenly, her new car in the driveway, the renovated garden, all those small updates to the house she'd mentioned in her calls, they took on a different meaning. I grabbed my laptop, fingers flying over the keys as I tried to access our accounts. Locked out. Every single one. The cheap motel lamp cast shadows across my screen like prison bars, and that's exactly how I felt. Trapped, while someone else held all the keys. Building our dream life, she'd written. But whose dream was it, really? And more importantly, who was paying for it? The water stain above my bed had started to look like a target, and I was starting to feel like I'd been in someone's crosshairs for longer than I'd realized. I barely slept that night. By 7 the next morning, I was standing outside First Colonial Bank, watching the cleaning crew finish up inside. My reflection in the glass looked like hell. Wrinkled uniform from yesterday. Stubble that would have earned me extra PT back at base. But I didn't care. I needed answers. The minute they unlocked the doors, I was at the counter. Sarah, the usual teller who'd known me for years, took one look at my face and dropped her cheerful morning greeting. "Good morning, Mr. Durham. How can I help you today?" "Need to check my accounts." My voice came out rougher than intended. All of them. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, and I watched her expression shift from professional to concerned. "I'm seeing some significant recent activity. 2 weeks ago, there were several large withdrawals." "How large?" She turned the screen slightly. The numbers made my head spin. 70,000 from our joint savings. Another 45,000 from my personal account. And the retirement fund I'd been building since my first deployment? Completely drained. "These were all authorized by Mrs. Durham," Sarah said carefully. She had the proper documentation. What documentation? More typing. A notarized power of attorney form, and your signature authorizing the transfers. She pulled up a scanned document. There it was, my signature at the bottom. Except I hadn't signed anything in months. The marble counter felt cold under my palms as I leaned forward. "I never signed that." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, I was deployed. That's not my signature." She glanced toward her supervisor's office. "Mr. Durham, I think you should speak with—" But I was already moving, pushing through the glass doors, nearly running to my truck. The drive home— No, not home anymore, took 5 minutes. I broke every speed limit. The first punch to the gut was the "For Sale" sign stuck in our front yard. Clean, professional, with Brandon's real estate company logo right at the top. Of course, the second hit came from Mrs. Peterson next door, watering her roses and giving me that look. Pity mixed with curiosity, like I was some kind of stranger trespassing. I fumbled with my keys, but the lock was different. New. My key didn't fit. You know that moment in movies where everything goes quiet and the camera zooms in real slow? That's how it felt standing there, staring at a lock I couldn't open, on a house I thought I owned, paid for with combat pay and deployment bonuses. Every sacrifice, every firefight, every night spent missing home, it all came down to this moment. My hand shook as I called the county treasurer's office. The woman on the other end was efficient, professional, and delivered the killing blow without emotion. Yes, the property at 1247 Maple Drive was refinanced last month. Ownership was transferred to Valerie Durham via power of attorney. We have the notarized documents on file. A pause. "They were submitted during your last deployment, sir." I sat down right there on the front steps. My steps, damn it, and tried to breathe. The morning sun felt too bright, too normal. Mrs. Peterson had stopped watering her roses to watch me. Everything I owned, everything I'd built over 18 years of service, gone, transferred, stolen. The house I'd bought with cash from my first 2 deployments, the savings I'd scraped together through 3 combat tours, my retirement fund, built one dangerous mission at a time. All of it signed away by a signature that wasn't mine, on papers I'd never seen, while I was half a world away trusting the wrong people to have my back. The irony hit like a kick to the chest. I'd survived firefights, IEDs, and a rebuilt knee, only to be taken down by a pen and paper, by someone who knew exactly how to exploit the trust I'd given her. A car drove by slowly, probably another neighbor wondering why a uniformed Marine was sitting on the steps of a house for sale. I didn't care. Let them look. Let them see what betrayal does to a man who's given everything and ended up with nothing. 5 days felt like 5 years in that motel room. The wallpaper, some faded floral pattern from the 80s, started to blur into abstract shapes after the 3rd sleepless night. My world had shrunk to a queen-sized bed that smelled like industrial detergent, a mini fridge humming in the corner, and the steady drip of a bathroom faucet I couldn't quite turn off. You ever notice how time moves different when you're drowning? The hours stretched like taffy, marked only by trips to the vending machine down the hall. Breakfast was instant oatmeal made with hot water from the coffee maker. Lunch and dinner were whatever combination of chips and candy bars I could stomach. The laptop screen glowed in the dim room as I worked my way through another list of lawyers. 27 calls in 5 days. 27 variations of sorry but without concrete evidence of fraud, or these power of attorney case are complicated. Some didn't even call back after hearing the details. The room had started to take on that particular smell. You know the one. Part sweat, part desperation, with notes of microwave popcorn and whatever hope smells like when it goes stale. My service uniform hung in the closet, a reminder of everything I'd earned and lost. "Look," said lawyer number 28, his voice tinny through the phone speaker. "Unless you can prove beyond doubt that your signature was forged." She was in North Carolina. I was in Afghanistan. The dates don't. That's circumstantial. We need hard evidence, Mr. Durham. Documentation. Witnesses. A pause. Have you considered mediation? I hung up. Mediation. Right. Let's sit down and talk reasonably about how my wife and best friend conspired to steal my life while I was dodging mortars. That's when I remembered a name. Hank Russo, a retired JAG officer who'd helped one of my squad mates with a benefits dispute. I'd kept his card, folded in my wallet behind my military ID, for 3 years. Never thought I'd need it. The office address led me to a converted Victorian house on the edge of town. No fancy sign, just a brass plate. H. Russo, legal consultation. The screen door creaked when I pushed it open. Hank sat behind a desk that looked like it had survived several wars itself. White hair buzzed, military short, thick glasses, and the kind of scowl that said he'd seen every trick in the book and written a few new chapters himself. Sergeant Durham. He didn't stand, just gestured to the chair across from him. "Tell me why you're here." I laid it out. The surprise return, the betrayal, the financial gut punch. His expression didn't change until I mentioned the notarized documents. "Show me," he said. I pulled up the scanned power of attorney form on my phone. Hank studied it. Then something shifted in his eyes, a predator catching a scent. "When exactly was this notarized?" "March 15th. "And you were where?" "Forward Operating Base in Kandahar." A faint grin crossed his face. "You bring me paper and contradictions. I'll bring a knife to their lie." He stood up, moved to a filing cabinet. "We start with your deployment records. Every date, every location. Then bank statements, property records." He pulled out a legal pad. "Those documents have fingerprints all over them. Digital trails, witness signatures, timestamps. Nothing exists in isolation. For the next 4 hours, we built a timeline. My military leave records on one side, financial transactions on the other. Hank's pen moved across the paper, connecting dots, circling dates that didn't match. "Look here," he pointed. "The notary stamp. It's from a place in Jacksonville. We get security footage, credit card records from that day." He tapped the desk. "But everything needs to be bulletproof. They'll try to explain away one contradiction. We need a pattern." For the first time in 5 days, the fog in my head started to clear. This wasn't just anger anymore. It was arithmetic, evidence, strategy. "Here's what we need," Hank said, sliding a list across the desk. "Bank records going back 6 months. Cell phone logs. Every piece of paper with your signature from the last year. We find the truth in the details." I looked at the list, then at Hank's determined expression. "You really think we can prove it?" "Son, I've spent 40 years watching people lie on paper. They always leave tracks." He leaned back. "The question is, are you ready for a war?" The next few days blurred into a paper chase through Hank's office. Ever seen what 18 years of financial records looks like when it's spread across every flat surface? Like someone bombed an accountant's office? The place already had that lived-in chaos. Law books stacked in corners, case files threatening to avalanche off shelves. But we added our own layer of organized madness. "Timestamps," Hank kept saying, shuffling through bank statements. "Everything leaves a digital footprint these days." His glasses caught the afternoon light as he squinted at another document. "People think they're clever, but they forget about the small stuff." I'd been running on coffee and protein bars, tracking down every transaction Valerie had made in the past 6 months. The familiar scent of old paper and ink reminded me of nights in the company office, sorting through requisition forms. Funny how the skills that kept a platoon supplied now helped me unravel my own life. "Got something," I said, holding up a credit card statement. 3 purchases at that notary's strip mall on March 15th. Coffee shop at 9:15 a.m., office supply store at 9:45, then the notary at 10:30. Hank's eyes narrowed. "The same day as the power of attorney filing. We need that security footage." He reached for his phone, punched in a number from memory. "Janet? Hank Russo. Remember that favor you owe me from the Peterson case?" A pause. "Yeah, I'm calling it in. Need surveillance footage from Coastal Notary Services, March 15th, between 10 and 11 a.m. While we waited, I dug through more paperwork, found a pattern in Valerie's spending. Small purchases at first, testing the waters, then bigger ones after the power of attorney went through. Like watching someone get brave with theft, $1 at a time. "Mike!" Hank's voice cut through my thoughts. He'd moved to his computer, squinting at an email attachment. "Come look at this." The security footage was grainy, the kind of quality you'd expect from a strip mall camera. But there they were. Valerie walking in first, followed by a man in a Marine Service uniform. Even through the pixels, I recognized Brandon's swagger. "Son of a bitch," I muttered. He posed as me, impersonating military personnel during a legal proceeding. Hank's voice had that edge, the one that said someone had just made a career-ending mistake. That's not just fraud anymore. That's federal territory. We spent the next hour documenting timestamps, matching them against my deployment records. The evidence kept stacking up. Me in Afghanistan, while Brandon played dress-up in Jacksonville. Valerie's signature on documents she shouldn't have had access to. Bank withdrawals that didn't match any authorized spending. "It's good," Hank said. "But we need more. Fraud cases live or die on patterns, not single incidents." My phone buzzed, a number I recognized from division headquarters. "Durham," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sergeant, this is Sharon from HR. There's an irregularity flag on your pension review. The board meets in 86 days, and we need to clear up some asset discrepancies before then." My stomach dropped. What kind of discrepancies? Large-scale property transfers and account depletions. Without proper documentation, it could be classified as voluntary asset forfeiture. That would affect your pension eligibility. I looked at Hank, mouthed 86 days. His jaw tightened. After I hung up, we sat in silence for a moment. The office fan whirred overhead, shuffling papers like dealing cards. "All right," Hank said finally, pulling out a fresh legal pad. "We've got impersonation at the notary, unauthorized transfers, and timeline contradictions. Good start. But if we're racing a pension board, we need something bulletproof." He began writing. "I'm filing subpoenas for their phone records next. Every call, every text message. People get sloppy when they think no one's watching." I stared at the security footage still frozen on his screen. My supposed best friend wearing my uniform, walking into that office like he had every right to be me. The image burned itself into my memory, right next to the sight of him in my bed. "How do you want to play this?" I asked. Hank looked up from his legal pad, that predator's glint back in his eyes. "First rule of warfare. Let the enemy think they're winning. While we build this case, you stay quiet. Let them feel safe. The more comfortable they get, the more mistakes they'll make." The pension clock hit me harder than any IED ever had. 86 days to prove theft before losing everything I'd earned through blood and sand. You ever notice how time moves differently when you're desperate? Every minute feels like it's slipping through your fingers. "We need proof of big purchases," Hank said one morning, tapping his pen against a legal pad. "The kind that leaves paper trails." That's how I found myself at Coastal Motors, playing dumb with a sales manager named Todd. I'd seen Valerie's new SUV in our driveway that last day. Couldn't miss it, gleaming like a trophy of betrayal. "Yeah, my wife mentioned stopping by," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Can't remember the details, though. Deployment scrambles your memory sometimes, you know?" Todd's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, sure, Mrs. Durham. Beautiful white Escalade, fully loaded, sweet ride." He typed something into his computer. "Paid cash, too. That's rare these days." My throat tightened. "Cash?" "Full amount, right up front." He swiveled his monitor toward me. "Here's the paperwork. Primary buyer listed as Valerie Durham. Said something about a joint account transfer?" I forced a smile, even as my hands clenched under the desk. "Mind if I get a copy of that? For our records?" Back in Hank's office, I spread out the dealership documents next to our bank statements. The numbers matched perfectly. A massive withdrawal from our joint account the same day she bought the SUV. "She didn't even try to hide it," I muttered, disgust rising in my throat. The memory of those long nights in Afghanistan hit me. Counting dollars, planning our future. 18 years of combat pay, gone in one afternoon. Hank was scrolling through something on his phone. "Mike," he said suddenly, "when's the last time you checked her social media?" "Been avoiding it." Just the thought of seeing her face made my stomach turn. "Take a look at this." He handed me his phone. Open to Valerie's Instagram. Recent photos showed her posed in what looked like some tropical paradise. Palm trees, infinity pool, the works. "It's fake," I said, recognizing the backdrop. "That's from Starlight Photo Studio downtown. They do vacation mock-ups." "Keep scrolling." Then I saw it. A photo of 2 plane tickets, carefully arranged next to a passport. Valerie's caption read, "Paradise awaits. Belize. New chapter." "Zoom in on that ticket receipt," Hank instructed. I did. The image was crystal clear, probably meant to make her followers jealous, but all I saw were the last 4 digits of the credit card used for purchase. 4892. My card. The one I'd reported stolen 3 weeks ago. "There's your smoking gun," Hank said, already reaching for his legal forms. "Credit card fraud across state lines, documented on social media. She just handed us felony evidence." I stared at those digits until they burned into my vision. "When's the flight date?" 7 days from now." Hank was writing furiously. We need to file civil charges immediately and get her subpoenaed before she leaves the country. The next few hours became a blur of paperwork and legal terms. Hank worked his contacts, expediting our filing through the county clerk's office. I sat there watching him, remembering all those times Valerie had called me paranoid for keeping receipts, for double-checking accounts. How fast can we serve her? I asked. With the right judge and evidence of flight risk? Hank looked up from his stack of forms. We can have papers in her hands by tomorrow morning. But Mike, he fixed me with that steely JAG officer stare. Once this starts, there's no going back. She'll know exactly what's coming. I pulled out my phone, looked one more time at that Instagram post. The casual way she'd flaunted those tickets, using money that represented years of my life spent in combat zones. Each deployment flash came back. The weight of body armor, the taste of dust, the constant vigilance, all while she planned her escape with my so-called brother-in-arms. Good, I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. Let her know. Hank nodded once, reached for his phone. I've got a process server who owes me a favor. Specializes in difficult cases. He started dialing. Time to show your wife what real surprise feels like. Hank's Toyota growled up the courthouse steps 2 counties over, where he swore the judges weren't soft on fraud. I'd seen that look in his eyes before, on senior NCOs planning an ambush. He grabbed his briefcase, already stuffed with exhibits labeled A through M, and marched inside like he was storming a position. Wait here, he ordered. Let me work the clerk's office first. I settled onto a wooden bench in the hallway, surrounded by that distinct government building smell. Old paper and floor wax. You know that feeling when you're about to kick in a door and your whole body goes quiet? That's where I was, watching suits and badges drift past. 3 hours crawled by. I counted ceiling tiles, tracked footsteps, anything to keep my mind from spinning out. Finally, Hank emerged with a stack of stamped papers and that razor-thin smile. Judge Hawthorne, he announced. Marine's daughter. Lost her mother's savings to a caregiver scam last year. She signed our emergency petition in 10 minutes. Back at his office, we transformed his conference room into something between a tactical ops center and a prosecutor's war room. Every wall sprouted timeline charts, bank records, and surveillance stills. Red string connected key dates to transactions. I'd built similar target packages in Iraq, tracking insurgent money trails. Never thought I'd use those skills to map my own wife's betrayal. The subpoenas will hit them tomorrow morning, Hank said, marking up a notepad. Brandon first, then Valerie. Different times, so they can't coordinate stories. I nodded, pinning up another document. Think they'll show? They have to. Emergency filing means the judge can freeze all accounts immediately if they don't appear. He tapped his pen against the desk. But Mike, they'll bring lawyers. Expensive ones. You ready for that? Was I ready? Hell, I'd been ready since that first morning at the bank, watching that teller's face shift from helpful to concerned. But standing there, surrounded by the paper trail of my dismantled life, something else gnawed at me. I need some air, I told Hank. The motel room felt smaller than usual that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding our wedding photo, the only personal item I'd grabbed before walking out. The glass was cracked now, a thin line running between us like a prophecy I'd missed. There I was, ramrod straight in my dress blues, ribbons perfectly aligned, and Valerie, beaming in white, her hand resting over my heart like she owned it. Maybe she did. Maybe that was the problem. You spend enough time in combat zones, you learn to spot when something's wrong. A wire in the dirt, a shadow where it shouldn't be. But I'd missed every sign at home. The late-night calls she'd take outside, the new clothes appearing without receipts. Brandon's truck parked 2 blocks away instead of in our driveway like usual. I traced the edge of my younger face in the photo. That Marine looked so damn certain, so sure of his world. Now, I felt like a ghost built from armor plate and borrowed trust, haunting my own life's ruins. The bedside clock blinked 2:37 a.m. In a few hours, process servers would ambush Valerie and Brandon with subpoenas. Part of me wanted to be there, to see their faces. But another part, the part still wearing shrapnel scars and hearing mortars and thunderstorms, wondered if all this evidence would be enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Hank. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we remind them why you don't steal from Marines." I set the wedding photo face down and tried to remember the last time I'd really slept. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles, casting strange shadows. Each rotation seemed to ask the same question. What if the proof isn't enough? What if 18 years of loyalty weighs less in court than a clever lawyer's words? The fan kept turning. I kept watching. And somewhere between the shadows and dawn, I remembered something my first platoon sergeant told me. The thing about betrayal, Durham, is it never comes from your enemies. I touched my dog tags, still hanging around my neck after all these years. The metal felt cool, constant. Maybe that's all I had left. The things that hadn't changed, hadn't lied. Tomorrow would come with its own war, fought in fluorescent lights and legal papers. But tonight, in this quiet room, I was still a Marine. And Marines don't lose battles just because they're outnumbered. The courthouse steps felt like a mountain that morning. Each marble stair reminded me of another lie, another betrayal. Hank walked beside me, briefcase swinging like a pendulum marking time until judgment. "Remember," he muttered, "let me do the talking. Your job is to sit there and look exactly like what you are, a decorated Marine who got screwed." The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and old wood, with that underlying tang of anxiety that seems to seep into legal walls. I settled into the hard wooden chair beside Hank, forcing my hands to stay flat on the table instead of curling into fists. You ever notice how time moves differently when you're waiting for something to explode? Each minute stretched like desert highway until the door opened. Valerie walked in like she was entering a garden party, not a civil hearing. Designer blazer, fresh highlights, that practiced smile she'd wear at officers' wives' functions. Brandon shuffled in behind her, trying to match her confidence, but looking more like a kid caught raiding the cookie jar. Their lawyers flanked them, suits probably worth more than my truck. Judge Hawthorne didn't waste time on pleasantry. "Mr. Russo, present your case." Hank stood, and I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Your Honor, we're here to expose a calculated conspiracy of fraud, identity theft, and financial coercion perpetrated against an active-duty serviceman." He started with the power of attorney document, pulled up side-by-side comparisons of my actual signature versus the forged one. The projector hummed as evidence filled the screen. Bank withdrawals, credit card statements, property deed transfers. Each click of Hank's presentation remote was another nail in their coffin. "And now," Hank said, his voice carrying that special kind of quiet that demands attention, security footage from Notary Express, dated March 15th. The grainy video showed Valerie entering with Brandon. He was wearing my old service jacket, the one with my name tape. My stomach clenched as I watched him sign my name, while the notary, who we'd learn was Valerie's cousin, stamped approval. Brandon's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. The quality of this footage is clear enough to show intent to deceive," Hank cut in, "and we have the notary's written confession confirming the fraud." That hit landed hard. Brandon's face went from sunburned to ghost white in seconds. Valerie's perfect posture cracked just a fraction, but Hank was just warming up. He projected Valerie's Instagram feed next. Every luxury purchase, every vacation booking, every shopping spree. Beside each photo, he showed the corresponding charges on my stolen cards. The timeline was devastating. While I was sleeping in forward operating bases, she was building a paper trail of theft. "Mrs. Durham," Judge Hawthorne interrupted, Did you believe you had legal authority to make these purchases? Valerie's lawyer whispered something, but she was already talking. We had an understanding. Michael always said, "What's his is mine." An understanding? Hank's voice could have stripped paint. Did that understanding include Mr. Keller impersonating your husband at legal proceedings? The room went dead silent. Even the court reporter's fingers froze mid-type. Your Honor, Hank continued, we have phone records showing coordinated calls between Mrs. Durham and Mr. Keller planning each fraudulent filing. Text messages discussing how to forge signatures. Security footage from 3 separate banks where Mr. Keller posed as my client to authorize transfers. I watched Brandon sink lower in his chair. The tough Marine who'd once saved my life in Fallujah couldn't even meet my eyes now. Judge Hawthorne reviewed the evidence files, each page turned like a hammer fall. Finally, she looked up, steel in her gaze. Mrs. Durham, Mr. Keller, this court finds compelling evidence of coordinated fraud and identity theft. All assets in question are hereby frozen pending full investigation. Mrs. Durham, you will face criminal charges unless full restitution is made within 30 days. She turned to Brandon. Mr. Keller, your role in this deception will be reported to the VA board for review of your benefit status. I felt something unlock in my chest, like a pressure valve finally releasing. Beside me, Hank allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, temporary ownership of all disputed properties and vehicles reverts to Mr. Durham until final settlement. Defendants will surrender all access cards and keys before leaving this courthouse. Valerie's perfect mask shattered completely. She looked around wildly like someone drowning. Brandon just stared at his hands, shoulders slumped in defeat. For the first time since walking into my bedroom that day, I could breathe without pain. The truth was out. The damage was counted, and justice, cold, clean justice, was finally served. 2 weeks after the hearing, I sat in Hank's office, staring at an official letter from the Marine Corps Pension Board. My hands weren't exactly steady as I opened it. Well, Hank looked up from his coffee, those weathered eyes catching every micro-expression on my face. After thorough review, no evidence of voluntary forfeiture, benefits retained in full. I had to read it twice to believe it. They're keeping my pension intact. Hank's face cracked into that rare, genuine smile. Damn right they are. 18 years of service doesn't wash away because someone else committed fraud. I remembered those endless nights in the motel, wondering if I'd lose everything I'd worked for. The weight of that fear finally lifted, leaving me almost dizzy with relief. There's more, Hank said, sliding a fresh stack of papers across his desk. Judge Hawthorne's final ruling came in this morning. The document was thick with legal language, but the key points jumped out clear as day. The court had frozen Valerie and Brandon's joint account, the one they'd been funneling my money into, pending complete restitution. With interest. How much? I asked. $212,437. Hank tapped the figure with his pen. That's including the house equity they tried to steal, the drained accounts, and every unauthorized charge they made, plus statutory interest. The number hit me like a physical force. I'd known they'd taken a lot, but seeing it quantified made my throat tight. All those deployments, all that careful saving, they'd tried to steal my entire financial future. Keep reading, Hank urged. I flipped through pages until I found what he meant. The judge had ordered the immediate seizure of their Belize trip funds, almost 30 grand in prepaid bookings and spending money. All of it would be credited toward their debt to me. There's something else you should see. Hank turned his computer monitor toward me. On screen was an official military personnel database. Brandon's record filled the page, but what caught my eye was the stark red text across the top. Discharge status. Updated. Dishonorable. His appeal to retain VA benefits was denied this morning. Hank explained. The fraud conviction triggered an automatic review. He's lost medical coverage, education benefits, everything. I remembered Brandon in Iraq, how he'd had my back in firefights, shared his last water during long patrols, the brother in arms who became a brother in betrayal. Now his name was mud in the very community he'd once served. Word spreading fast through the veteran grapevine, Hank added quietly. Nobody likes a fraud, especially one who steals from his own. My phone buzzed, a news alert from the local paper. They'd picked up the story. Marine veteran's wife and former serviceman convicted in major fraud scheme. There was Valerie's carefully curated social media photo, right next to Brandon's service picture. Their perfect facade cracked wide open for everyone to see. One more thing, Hank said, pulling out a final document. Remember that cousin of Valerie's? The notary who helped them forge your signature? State Board suspended her license yesterday. Permanent record of ethics violation. The dominoes were falling one by one. Every person who'd helped them betray me was facing consequences. It wasn't vindication exactly. That implied something personal. This was justice, pure and simple. You know what gets me, I said, gathering the papers. They could have just asked for a divorce, a clean break. Instead, they tried to steal my whole life. Hank nodded, understanding in his eyes. Greed makes people stupid. Pride makes them cruel. I thought of Valerie's Instagram posts, all those luxury purchases with my stolen money. Brandon wearing my clothes, sleeping in my bed. They'd treated my life like a convenience store, open for taking whatever they wanted. Now the bill had come due. And unlike those easy credit card swipes, this debt would follow them for years. Every penny they earned would go toward paying me back. Every job application would show their fraud conviction. Every military connection Brandon had would know his true character. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration of my assets, my name, and my dignity. The system I'd served for 18 years had served justice right back. I looked down at my dog tags, still hanging faithful around my neck. The metal caught the light, reminding me of everything they represented. Honor, loyalty, service. Values that meant something. Values that, in the end, had helped truth win out. I stood in the empty living room, my footsteps echoing against bare walls where our photos used to hang. Funny how a space can feel both foreign and familiar at the same time. The morning sun streamed through windows Valerie had upgraded with my money. Custom blinds that had cost more than my first car. You ever notice how memories stick to walls like invisible wallpaper? Every corner of this place held echoes. There, by the kitchen doorway, was where I'd carried her across the threshold. That dent in the baseboard? From assembling our first real furniture set between deployments. Even the smell was a time machine. Fresh paint covering up years of shared breakfasts and lazy Sunday coffees. My fingers traced along the chair rail as I walked the perimeter. The wood was smooth, recently refinished. Had to hand it to Valerie. She'd known how to spend money, even if it wasn't hers to spend. Every improvement she'd made with stolen funds had actually raised the property value. The realtor couldn't believe her luck when I listed it. "This market's hot right now," she'd said, flipping through her comp sheets. "And these upgrades? We can go 12% above your purchase price, easy." I'd signed the listing agreement on the spot. Let someone else make new memories here. The buyers were a young couple, first-time homeowners with stars in their eyes. They loved everything about the place. The updated kitchen, the custom closets, even that ridiculous spa shower Valerie had installed last spring. Their offer came in over asking within 48 hours. "The previous owner had amazing taste," the wife gushed during the final walkthrough. "Those built-ins in the master bedroom are gorgeous." I'd just nodded, not mentioning that those built-ins were bought with fraud. Let them enjoy the spoils of Valerie's spending spree. The profit would help fund my fresh start. My new place was about half the size, A ranch-style house in a quiet neighborhood across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. All mine. I'd paid cash, insisted on extra title insurance, and triple-checked every document before signing. The deed hung framed in my home office, my name alone in black and white. But standing here in the old house, watching dust motes dance in sunbeams, something still felt unfinished. The legal victory was complete. The money was being repaid. The truth was public record. So why did it feel like there was one more page left to turn? I walked into what used to be our bedroom. The mattress was gone, but I could still see the outline where Brandon and Valerie had, "No, don't go there." That image didn't deserve real estate in my head anymore. Instead, I focused on the walk-in closet, now empty except for a few wire hangers. The built-ins really were beautiful work. Valerie had documented the whole installation process on her Instagram, #BlessedLife. I wondered if she'd keep posting from whatever discount apartment she and Brandon had landed in. My phone buzzed. A text from the realtor. Closing was set for tomorrow morning. In 24 hours, this would officially be someone else's home, someone else's fresh start. I did one final sweep, checking for anything left behind. The garage was empty except for a few oil stains on the concrete. The attic was clear. The backyard, that's when I saw it. Parked proud as you please in the neighbor's driveway. Brandon's cherry red Mustang. The one he'd bought right after that suspicious cash deposit into their joint account. The one he'd probably driven here for their afternoon rendezvous while I was deployed. I pulled out my phone and opened the court documents. Yep. There it was, in black and white. Any assets purchased with fraudulently obtained funds were subject to seizure. And I had the bank records proving exactly where that car's down payment had come from. A slow smile spread across my face as I dialed Hank's number. Maybe there was one last page to turn after all. One final bit of karmic accounting to settle. "Hey," I said when he picked up. "Remember that asset recovery clause in the judgment? I think I just found something that needs repossessing." A month into my new life, I was sitting in my truck across from Valerie's downgraded living situation, a beige apartment complex with peeling trim and patchy landscaping. Amazing how quick someone's standards could adjust when their fraud-funded lifestyle got yanked away. The morning sun caught the cherry red paint of Brandon's Mustang, parked in the shared lot, like it belonged there. That car had been his pride and joy, bought with a suspicious cash deposit that matched, to the dollar, what Valerie had siphoned from our accounts. Funny how karma works sometimes. I sipped my coffee and pulled out my phone, checking the court documents one more time. Yep, right there in Section 8. All assets purchased with fraudulently obtained funds are subject to immediate seizure as compensation. The title transfer paperwork sat in my glove box, signed by the judge himself. You know that feeling when everything lines up just right? When justice isn't just a fancy word in a courtroom, but something real you can reach out and touch. That's what was sitting in front of me, wrapped in red paint and chrome. I dialed Big Jim's Towing. They'd been eager to help when I explained the situation. Seems I wasn't the first person to need this particular service for this particular reason. "We're about 10 minutes out," the dispatcher said. "You got the paperwork ready?" All signed and notarized. I couldn't help smiling at that word. Notarized. Properly this time. The tow truck rumbled into view right on schedule, yellow lights spinning lazily. The driver, a burly guy with Steve on his coveralls, gave me a knowing nod as I handed over the documents. "Clean and quick," he said, starting to position the flatbed. "We've done plenty of these." I leaned against my truck, watching Steve work with professional efficiency. The heavy chains clinked as he secured them around the Mustang's wheels. The hydraulics whirred, tilting the flatbed. It was almost peaceful, in a mechanical sort of way. Then I heard it. The sharp click of heels on concrete, followed by a gasp that could have cracked glass. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Valerie's voice hit that shrill note I remembered from our worst arguments. She came charging across the parking lot, designer purse swinging like a weapon. "That's Brandon's car! Stop right now!" Steve didn't even pause, just kept working the controls. The Mustang's front wheels were already off the ground. "I said stop!" She was close enough now that I could see her face. All that carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the rage. "I'm calling the police." I held up the court order, letting the official seal catch the sunlight. "Go ahead. They'll tell you the same thing this says. The car was bought with stolen money. My money. And now it's mine." The Mustang settled onto the flatbed with a solid thunk. Steve started securing the tie-downs. "You can't!" Valerie's voice cracked. "Brandon needs that car for work. We're trying to rebuild—" "Should have thought about that before you forged my signature." The words came out calm, matter of fact. All the anger had burned away months ago, leaving nothing but clear purpose. She tried to step toward the truck, but Steve moved between us, clipboard extended. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. All the paperwork's in order." I watched her scan the documents, watched the fight drain out of her as reality sank in. Her shoulders slumped, designer bags suddenly looking as fake as everything else about her life. Steve finished the last safety check and gave me a thumbs up. The hydraulics whirred again as the flatbed leveled out. "We're good to go," he called. "Following you to the storage lot?" I nodded, already heading for my truck. Behind me, I heard Valerie's heels scraping on concrete as she backed away. The tow truck pulled out first, Mustang secured and gleaming. I followed, adjusting my rearview mirror one last time. Valerie stood frozen in the parking lot, arms wrapped around herself, watching her carefully constructed world shrink in the distance. My dog tags clinked softly against my chest as I turned onto the main road. The sound was familiar, grounding, a reminder of who I was and what I stood for. The morning sun caught the metal, throwing bright sparks across the dashboard. That's the thing about loyalty, real loyalty. It's not blind faith or endless forgiveness. Sometimes it's knowing exactly when to call in the tow truck. The storage facility wasn't far from my new place, one of those fancy climate-controlled setups where people stash their summer cars and project builds. I'd rented a spot for a month, figured that'd be enough time to sort things out. Steve helped me get the Mustang positioned just right. Those wide tires filling up the concrete pad like they belonged there. The engine ticked as it cooled, and that new car smell still clung to the leather interior. Brandon had babied this thing. I'll give him that much. "Need anything else?" Steve asked, unhooking the last chain. I shook my head, pressed a tip into his palm. "Thanks for making it clean." "Anytime." He gathered his gear, paused at the door. "Hope it helped, brother." "More than you know." After he left, I stood there for a while, just looking at the Mustang parked next to my truck. The contrast was almost funny. My weathered F-150 with its Marine Corps sticker versus this shiny red reminder of betrayal. Two vehicles, two very different stories. You ever notice how some memories stick to things? Like they're not just objects anymore, but markers for pieces of your life? I ran my hand across the Mustang's hood, feeling the smooth paint under my palm. Brandon used to go on and on about this car, how it was his dream ride since we were boots fresh out of training. Now it was just metal and memories, both of them cooling in the fluorescent lights. I wasn't keeping it. That was never the point. Maybe I'd sell it, donate the money to the VA hospital where I did my knee rehab, or maybe I'd find some young Marine getting started, sell it to them for $1, just to watch karma turn full circle. Hadn't decided yet. Walking to the back of the garage, I checked the security system one more time. The camera feed looked clear, showing both vehicles from different angles. Not that I expected trouble. Valerie and Brandon were done fighting, but 18 years in the Corps teaches you to secure your position, no matter what. My new workspace took up the far wall. Nothing fancy, just a bench and some basic tools. But above it hung three things that mattered: my framed DD2 warranty showing honorable discharge, the pension approval letter that arrived yesterday, and a Marine Corps challenge coin I'd carried through 3 deployments. The coin caught the light as I passed, making me pause. Master Sergeant Phillips had given it to me after that mess in Fallujah. "For the man who brings everyone home," he'd said. Funny how life works. I'd saved Brandon that day, pulled him from burning metal and smoke. Now here I was, standing next to his car, in a climate-controlled box, trying to figure out if any of it meant anything. But that's the thing about meaning. Sometimes you have to make your own. I'd done that today. Watching Valerie's face as the tow truck pulled away, seeing the last of her power crumble like sand. It wasn't joy I felt. More like gravity finally working right again. The garage door hummed as I hit the button, metal panels sliding down with mechanical precision. Security lights kicked on automatically, casting long shadows across both vehicles. I stood there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the dimmer light. My dog tags clinked softly against my chest as I straightened up. The sound echoed off the concrete walls, familiar as a heartbeat. In my hand, the Mustang's keys swung back and forth, catching glints of fluorescent light. The evening air hit me as I stepped outside, crisp, clean, carrying just a hint of autumn. It felt good in my lungs, like the first real breath after a long dive. Pain hadn't killed me. The Corps had taught me how to handle that, how to push through physical limits and keep moving. But betrayal? That almost did the job. Almost. Looking back through the garage's small window, I could just make out the shapes of both vehicles, the truck that carried me through honest years, and the Mustang that marked the end of false ones. 2 machines, 2 stories, 1 lesson learned the hard way. Never mistake loyalty for blindness. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.